The Broken Story by Reverend Christina Leone Tracy. This is a story about a man with a story about stories, if you will. Once upon a time, there was a man with a story. This wasn't any old once upon a time story, not one you could find on a bookshelf or hear around the campfire. This was his story and no one else's. This story had been carefully crafted. It began before he was born, and this story told of his loves and fears, his dreams realized, and his dreams yet to come. This story was complete. It told of his whole life, including those bits that still existed in his imagination. In fact, this story was so complete, and he was so happy with the story that he carried it around to make sure it was safe. It was somewhat bulky and unwieldy, but he didn't mind. It was his story. The thing about this story was, it was very fragile. Made up of many pieces and held together by his own imagination, he was worried it might break apart at any minute. And so he grew more and more protective of his story. He held it ever so closer. As he went about his life, he checked on the story to make sure he was following it correctly. He avoided adventures and unknowns because, well, they might break his story. Then one day, the inevitable happened. Without warning, his story broke. It was unforeseen, and he hadn't done anything wrong at all. But there it was, laying in 1,000 shattered pieces on the ground, with the sunlight glinting off the bits of story he had so carefully protected all those years. He was heartbroken. And since his story hadn't said to put the pieces back together, he was at a loss. What now? He sat down next to the pile of pieces and cried. A while later, maybe it was minutes, maybe it was hours, a group of people came out of a nearby building and saw him sitting on the sidewalk, surrounded by a pile of broken pieces, clearly in need of help. "Oh my, what happened here?" a woman asked. "My story, it's gone. I worked so hard to build it, to protect it, to keep it from harm, and now it's gone, gone," he wailed. "Is this the story here?" the man asked. "Yes, look at it. There's nothing left of it." "It looks like it's here, not gone," said a child. "We just have to put it back together." "Put it back together? There's no way. You don't even know what it looked like. How will you put it back together if you don't even know me?" But the child was tenacious. "Don't worry, with all of us here to help. We'll put it back together in a way that you would never even expect. You never know. It might be more beautiful than before." And so they swept up the pieces of this man's story carefully and went together into the building from which they had emerged. They poured him some hot coffee and sang a song he had never heard before. Something about an invitation to come again and again, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times. The song was soothing, and the coffee was warm. He began to feel hope again that his story could be put back together. And it took a long time. Maybe it was days. Maybe it was years. But they all got it put back together and added new parts and left out some of the old parts that didn't fit anymore. But that was okay. And the child had been right. It was more beautiful than before. And at this time, the story was held together not only by his imagination, but the imagination and support of an entire community. It wasn't nearly so fragile anymore. And it even allowed for adventure.